Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janavala Girivardhari Gopi Janavala Girivardhari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Stotra Shadashishi Majas Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Ananda Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Skaho, Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sham Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai, Yamuna Maya Ki Jai, Tulasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai. Sama Veta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to all the assembled devotees. All glories to all the assembled devotees. All glories to all the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Prabhupada. Nama Vishnu Radha Krishna Vishnu Shivani Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Vijani Nivshashishan Hari Prashna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 2, text 22. Vasangsi jirnani yata vihaya navani grinati naroparani tata sharirani vihaya jirnan yanyani samyati navani dehi. Vasamsi jirnani yata vihaya navani grinati naroparani tata sharirani vihaya jirnanyani samyati navani dehi. So word by word. Other way around. Here we go. Make it a bit bigger. Alright. Vasamsi, garments. Jirnani, old and worn out. Yatha, just as. Vihaya, giving up. Navani, new garments. Grinati, does accept. Naraha, a man. Aparani, others. In the same way. Sharirani, bodies. Vihaya, giving up. Jirnani, old and useless. Anyani, different. Samyati, verily accepts. Navani, new sets. Dehi, the embodied. Translation. As a person puts on new garments, giving up old ones, the soul similarly accepts new material bodies, giving up the old and useless ones. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Change of body by the atomic individual soul is an accepted fact. Even the modern scientists who do not believe in the existence of the soul, but at the same time cannot explain the source of energy from the heart, have to accept continuous changes of body, which appear from childhood to boyhood, and from boyhood to youth, and again from youth to old age. From old age, the change is transferred to another body. This has already been explained in a previous verse, 213. So Prabhupada's recapping here. This clear evidence that even though we're the same person, our body changes through different phases of life. And therefore, it makes sense that we will continue on into another change at the time that this body ends. Transference of the atomic individual soul to another body is made possible by the grace of the supersoul. The supersoul fulfills the desire of the atomic soul, as one friend fulfills the desire of another. The Vedas, like the Mundaka Upanishad, as well as the Svetashvatara Upanishad, compare the soul and the supersoul to two friendly birds sitting on the same tree. One of the birds, the individual atomic soul, is eating the fruit of the tree, and the other bird, Krishna, is simply watching his friend. Of these two birds, although they are the same in quality, one is captivated by the fruits of the material tree, while the other is simply witnessing the activities of his friend. Krishna is the witnessing bird, and Arjuna is the eating bird. Thank goodness for the mute button, otherwise you would have had to experience that cough. So Krishna is the witnessing bird, and Arjuna is the eating bird. Although they are friends, one is still the master, and the other is the servant. Forgetfulness of this relationship by the atomic soul is the cause of one's changing his position from one tree to another, or from one body to another. The jiva soul is struggling very hard on the tree of the material body, but as soon as he agrees to accept the other bird as the supreme spiritual master, as Arjuna agreed to do by voluntary surrender unto Krishna for instruction, the subordinate bird immediately becomes free from all lamentations. So here Prabhupada is paraphrasing another verse from the Bhagavad Gita. I can't remember the reference exactly straight off the top of my head. But the essence here is that the individual soul is struggling with the six senses, which include the mind. They're struggling with having to deal with this material body, including the subtle body. But as soon as we surrender to Krishna, all of the problems of this material world are solved. Another point which I wanted to raise, I'll just comment as we go, is that right at the beginning here, it's saying that the transferring of the soul from one body to another is by the grace of the supersoul, and that the supersoul fulfills the desire of the atomic soul. So when Prabhupada was at school at the Scottish Church's College, his professor was speaking, and he said that Hinduism doesn't work because the idea of karma is basically talking about judgment for our actions. But if there's a judgment for our actions, there has to be a judge. Where is that judge? And therefore, the professor was saying, therefore, this law of karma is not valid. And of course, Prabhupada knew that there is a judge, the supersoul. And, oops. Close this thing here. There we go. That there is a supersoul that travels with this living being throughout the universe. So in the spiritual world, we have direct relationship with Krishna. And the souls that make that choice to be in this material world are not left alone by Krishna. Krishna's like, okay, so you want to try enjoying independent of me? All right. I'm not going to force you. But what I'll do is I'll make sure that I keep an eye on you. Just like the example when a small child wants to run away from home, then the parent will go, okay, you can run away. But the parents will be hiding behind the tree and keeping an eye, just making sure that the child is safe. So the child is thinking that, oh yeah, I'm free, I've run away from home, I'm so independent. But still the parents are keeping an eye. We can also, as the children get older, the parents might also be just keeping a bit of an eye on their kids to see what they're up to. So this is love. Krishna says, yes, you can have your freedom, but I will not ever give you up. I'll always be there for you whenever you want to turn to me, and I'll keep an eye on you. So right from the beginning, Krishna, in the form of the super soul, has given these bodies according to the desire and mentality of the person. And that process continues on as long as we're in the material world. And then when we turn to the Supreme Lord and say, I no longer want to try to enjoy the fruits of this tree. I no longer want to be living my life with the goal of my selfish sense gratification. At that point, then Krishna starts to make he makes the arrangements for us to, advance in our Krishna consciousness and give up these bodies altogether. It's said that if you just make one step towards Krishna, he makes 1,000 steps towards you. And so this is the amazing thing about Krishna. On the one hand, he doesn't force anybody to do anything. He's allowing people their free will. At the same time, he doesn't say, okay, well, you made your choice. You made your bed. Now you have to sleep in it, kind of thing. No, he's waiting for the person to make the right decision, and is there to support and provide all kinds of facility to turn back to him. And so Prabhupada knew that, yes, there is a witness, there is a judge, it is a super soul. And therefore he could correct his professor, but he didn't. He observed the etiquette at the school. He didn't want to cause a disturbance there. But in himself, he was confident. And this is what we want for our children. There's often a concern that, if our children go out into the world, into the workplace, or into academia, to the high schools or universities, that they may be bewildered by atheistic philosophies or ideas which are harmful for them. So our aspiration is that we can strongly imbibe the Krishna conscious philosophy in our children, so that whatever ideas are coming to them, they know how to analyze them, and whether they want to debate or not, in themselves they can be confident about what they're doing and their position. So I thought it was just an interesting example of Srila Prabhupada, that he was in the world and there was propaganda against Krishna consciousness. And he neither tried to fight against it, or he didn't try to fight against it, and at the same time he was also very secure in his understanding of Krishna consciousness. He could see that this person is speaking out of ignorance, and I understand the way it really is, and therefore I don't need to take the words of this so-called professor seriously. So yeah, interesting point anyhow. So let's have a look now. Where did we get up to? Yeah, so the struggles in this world can be overcome when we just turn back to Krishna. Yes, okay. Both the Mundaka Upanishad 3.1.2 and the Svetashvatara Upanishad 4.7 confirm this. Samanya Vriksha Purusho Nimagno Nishaya Sochati Muyamanaha Jushtam Yada Pashyat Yanyam Isham Asya Himanam Iti Vitashokaha. Although the two birds are in the same tree, the eating bird is fully engrossed with anxiety and moroseness as the enjoyer of the fruits of the tree. But if in some way or other he turns his face to his friend the Lord and knows his glories, at once the suffering bird becomes free from all anxieties. So this is our position. We're in the material world trying to enjoy. We're suffering from anxiety. In the material world, there's different types of misery. But one way that you can classify it is hankering and lamenting. The anxiety, oh, will I get what I want? Will I lose what I have? And then the moroseness, I ate too much. I ate the wrong thing. I have a tummy ache. Or I've made a big mistake and now I'm suffering for it. So anxiety, the way I'm looking at this particular verse is, anxiety is unpleasant feelings based on what we think may happen, the future. Whereas moroseness is unhappiness about what has already happened. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about living in the moment. Don't live in the past and don't worry about the future, but just do the best you can in this particular moment of time. I forget exactly how it goes. Something like, forget the past for it sleeps, and the future, don't waste your time, don't think at all. But in the moment, I forget. Perhaps you remember the poem. But the point is clear, that this material existence is full of unpleasant experiences or feelings based on worrying about the past, worrying about the future, or lamenting about the past. Hankering and lamenting. Whereas in Krishna consciousness, our idea is that at every moment we should be trying to serve Krishna. How can I serve Krishna? Of course, it's good to reflect on the past and create visions for the future, but it's what we do in the moment now that really matters. And when we analyze any situation, no matter how bad something has happened, we can stop in the moment and think, Krishna's there, and all the anxiety goes away. And whatever we're anxious about in the future, we can say, well, right at this moment, I can think of Krishna. So it's just another thing to think about. And as soon as we turn to Krishna, we're dealing with eternal reality. Krishna we don't have to be anxious that Krishna is going to leave us. We don't have to feel any anxiety at all. We can have full confidence that Krishna will be there. And again, back to Vinod Thakur, surrender means understanding that Krishna is our only protector and our only maintainer. And who better to depend on? If we're depending on anybody less than Krishna, there's a possibility of being let down. But when you have the ultimate, original, supreme personality of Godhead, the perfect person, in charge of our protection and maintenance, we have no reason to be in any anxiety. So we'll continue. Arjuna has now turned his face towards his eternal friend Krishna and is understanding the Bhagavad Gita from him. And thus, hearing from Krishna, he can understand the supreme glories of the Lord and be free from lamentation. In the Bhagavad Gita, one of the first verses I learned was 529. It's called the Peace Formula. And the gist of it is that when we understand that there is a supreme person behind everything that happens in this world, and that he controls everything completely, and he's our friend, we've got no more reason to have anxiety. That verse also mentions that he's the object of all sacrifice. So the understanding is that when we offer everything we do to him, then he can make all the arrangements for our benefit, and no more lamentation. Arjuna is advised herewith by the Lord not to lament for the bodily change of his old grandfather and his teacher. He should rather be happy to kill their bodies in the righteous fight, so that they may be cleansed at once of all reactions from various bodily activities. One who lays down his life on the sacrificial altar or in the proper battlefield is at once cleansed of bodily reactions and promoted to a higher status of life. So there was no cause for Arjuna's lamentation. So this is quite radical, isn't it? He should rather be happy to kill their bodies. So what? He should be happy to kill his teacher and his grandfather. And then it continues on, of course. In the righteous fight, so that they may be cleansed at once of all reactions from various bodily activities. So, just like with the devotee, sometimes we may lament, oh, that devotee died, um, whatever the circumstances might be, and we may lament. But at the same time, we feel very happy because we know that because they're practicing Krishna consciousness, they'll go back to Krishna, or at least they'll advance in their next life, to a family of devotees where they can continue their progress in spiritual life. And especially when someone's becoming old and the body is causing distress, it's actually very glorious and something to feel um, gratitude for, that this person's left this place, this suffering condition, for a better condition. So this gives us a lot of peace of mind. People who lose loved ones, they often become very distressed. But with this understanding of renewed life in another body, then it gives a lot of peace, especially when we know someone has been practicing Krishna consciousness. I like this part here. One who lays down his life on the sacrificial altar or in the proper battlefield is at once cleansed of bodily reactions and promoted to a higher status of life. So this makes me think of, sacrificial altar. I was thinking there's famous stories of devotee elephants in Guruvayu. I've been meeting quite a few people from Kerala lately, and at the Guruvayu temple, they have many elephants. And in particular, there was one elephant known as Keshava. So today is Ekadasi, and this elephant Keshava, he used to fast on Ekadasi by his own choice. And at the time of his death, he broke free from his elephant enclosure, and he ran to the temple, and he just laid himself out, full dandavats, pranams, and he left his body in that way. So he lay his life down on the sacrificial altar, you could say. And I think in this specific case, in the Vedic culture, they actually did, in ancient times, they sacrificed animals, but they gave these animals new life through chanting mantras and amazing mystical things, which we can just dream of today. But when it says that one who lays down his life in the proper battlefield, this is Prabhupada's mood. He said, I want to die with my boots on, preaching. And that's why, in the later part of his life, the very, very last days, he went to England because he wanted to continue preaching. Of course, his health was so bad that he couldn't, it wasn't possible to continue. So he went back to Vrindavan and gave us the example of how to leave the body in the holy dham. But we also have the example of Bhakti Tirtha Swami. He deliberately said, I'm not going to Vrindavan or Mayapur. I want to show the devotees that wherever you are, if you're surrounded by devotees and you are, they're chanting the holy name and you're in Krishna consciousness, it doesn't matter where physically you are in the world. So this is very bold and an incredible example by Bhakti Tirtha Swami, because many of us may think, well, yeah, I understand the theory, but I'm not such a strong devotee. I don't want to take my chances. Rather, I pass away in Vrindavan or Mayapur. So he was teaching by his example and the way he left his body. The same also with my Guru Maharaj, His Holiness Bhakti Charya Swami. He left India, where the world was more or less shut down, and at that time there was the epidemic. The idea of this coronavirus was causing a lot of people to die, apparently, in America. And so people were advising, don't go to America, just stay where you are in India. But his final speech, he was saying that, am I just going to sit here in India, in Ujjain, where it's a safe place. I'm going to hide away in my, castle, let's say, while the soldiers are out on the battlefield fighting. That's not the way that a proper general will lead the battle. I'm going to go and be with the devotees and preach in the West. Although it may be a hellish place, and they talk about this danger of this coronavirus, I don't care. I'm not afraid of a coronavirus. And his mood was that even if I'm killed by this coronavirus, I don't care, because I'm going to die on the battlefield preaching and serving Srila Prabhupada. So yeah, these are some examples that I thought of when I'm reading in this section. And in the Vedic times, there was particular codes of conduct, and instead of the kind of warfare that we have today, where many civilians are killed, and there's a lot of dishonesty and not sure what the word is, cowardice, really. Like the big people like Biden or previously Bush, they weren't going to Iraq or to Ukraine and fighting a battle at the front lines themselves. No. They stay at home in America, and they send off the young boys for slaughter, and even girls now. So in the Vedic times, it wasn't like that. It was more like each side in the battle would arrange to meet and battle it out. You can almost imagine it's kind of like, okay, we're going to decide who gets to own the kingdom by having a big rugby game. So we'll collect all of the best athletes together and compete, and whoever wins the rugby game, they'll be the winners. It's almost like that, to the point where they would have this 18-day battle of Kurukshetra and fight to the death during the day, and in the evening they would go and visit each other and speak with each other. This was the kind of what is the word? It's a culture, and it's the kind of there's a kind of a dignity, I suppose, about it, that these people were living by moral codes. They weren't just living by the law of the jungle. In other words, no law. They were following proper religious codes given in Shastra. And that's why it mentions here, to kill their bodies in the righteous fight. So the way the fight was done was according to religious principles and Dharma Shastra, and the cause was also based on religious principles. And so therefore Arjuna should do his duty and not be afraid. There's nothing to lament about it. So going back to the verse again, this particular verse is emphasizing the fact that, so if you kill these elderly people, because at least compared to Arjuna, Drona and Bhishma were elderly. So therefore, if they were killed in the battle, then they would have a chance to have a renewed life. And therefore, killing an older, someone like that, is actually a benefit to them. That's not to say that euthanasia of old people, like the old TV program Logan's Run, is what we're suggesting here. But in the specific context, that he shouldn't think that, these are my seniors, and it's not going to be good for them. Actually, it would be good for them, because they'll have a chance to have new bodies. And that's what happens at the time of death when someone's old. Like my grandfather, he was suffering like anything in his old age, and he was like, I've had enough of this body. I just want it to all be over. And that's why, from a material point of view, people are proposing, euthanasia. Let people commit suicide. Let us help people commit suicide and get them out of their suffering. But we have to understand that there's laws of nature. If someone's killed in a battlefield in the proper course of a religious battle, then the benefits are there. But if someone by their own choice chooses to end their life, before it's destined, then that is a sinful activity, and there are unfortunate reactions for that. So the general idea is that for an old person to give up their body is good because they get a new body, and it's nothing that we should overly lament about. And understanding that the soul will continue. This is the main point. This Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 just again and again and again emphasizes you are not the body, you are the soul. And as Prabhupada's mentioning here, as well as you being the soul, there's a super soul who's with you, ready to help you at any time. You just have to turn to him. And when you turn to him, whatever anxieties you have in this life, will be finished. So that's the point that Prabhupada's emphasizing in his purport, that we should always remember Krishna's with us, and we should turn to him and try to follow the best that we can his instructions. And in that way, we'll be able to be free from all anxieties. It will be Vaikuntha, to quote Prabhupada again. So I'll just end here. I didn't, let's have a look if there's any. Oh, here we go. Amiyat Prabhu, thank you for being here again. The greatest battle was fought in the general's tent. The highest realization is to save oneself. I'm not so sure about the first quote. I'm not familiar with that one. Maybe you could elaborate a little bit more. It's a pity I can't share the audio. At least I don't know how to do that. But the highest realization is to save oneself. So this is an interesting one as well. Like, I believe Prabhupada said something like, the greatest thing we can do is to save the world. But even greater than that is to save ourselves. One way of understanding it is the other example of the person being on the airplane saying that when you want to, if there's an emergency and the oxygen drops down, give yourself the oxygen first, because then you'll be in a position to help others. Whereas if you try to help others without oxygen, you may die, and therefore the others that you want to help will not be able to be helped. So that's one understanding. It's also said something like something along the lines that you can sacrifice a person to save the village, and you can sacrifice the village to save the nation, but you can sacrifice the whole world to save yourself. So of course there's a balancing act here, because if someone's very selfish and they're willing to do anything to save their own material body, this is not what we're talking about here. If we try to save our own material body using illicit means at the expense of others, we're accumulating a horrible karmic debt. So we're not actually saving ourselves, we're digging a big hole for ourselves to be buried in. So these statements need to be understood from the perspective of the soul and religious principles or spiritual principles, not just material. And so the idea of saving ourselves means the practical conclusion is we need to be very strong in our sadhana and be very strict to maintain our Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada one time said that the problem with you Westerners is that you're not enough afraid of Maya. You're a bit too casual and think that, I'll be all right. Oh, I'm a strong fellow. And so I think this is what we need to always remember, that to save ourselves means our own Krishna consciousness comes first. Don't think that, I'm not going to chant, I'm not going to read the books, but I'm going to go and preach to the whole world. That's not a sound proposition. Where will our potency be? It won't be there for a start. And second of all, we have the risk that we may fall down ourselves. So we need, in order to preach strongly and help others, we need to be in a strong position. So it's a great quote. Thanks for that, Prabhu. And so now you've made a comment. I'll just put it here. I think it's coming up on the screen. So the quote that I guess I'll share the other quote first. The greatest battle was fought in the general's tent. Okay. And then this is what you've put afterwards. The quote is related to the internal struggle conquering the 6 enemies. Then you can conquer the world. Right. It's like it's easier to conquer the whole world than to have peace at home or something like that. I think is another quote similar to this. The greatest battle was fought in the general's tent. Yeah, it's an interesting quote. I mean, essentially, going back to Covey, because when I hear I'm always reminded of Stephen Covey. How does it say again? Internal victory precedes external victory, I believe is the quote. So unless we're able to conquer our own enemies, as you say here, lust, anger, greed, madness, delusion, envy, or in Nectar of Instruction also talks about having mastery over the Vajravagam, speech, mind, anger, the tongue, belly, genitals. Unless we're able to have discipline to control our own senses, then any so-called victory in the outer world will A, be unlikely, and B, won't really be a success. Because we can see that there were great generals or great conquerors who were able to conquer many lands, but because their mind was not controlled, because they were not Krishna conscious, they were always in fear. Just like this Shah Jahan, he built the Taj Mahal, and then out of extreme envy and fear, he killed all the people that built the Taj Mahal to make sure that no one would ever build another monument as good as that. And if his son Aurangzeb had the same mentality, he was traveling around Vrindavan smashing the temples because he didn't want any of the temples to be taller than his palace. So you can see that although they were successful in conquering outside, on the inside they were conquered. they were not happy because their senses were not under control. Also, the greatest battle was fought in the general's tent. I'm still not 100% sure the context of this, but another thought about it is that Prabhupada said that this movement will not be destroyed from the outside. It can only be destroyed from the inside. So I think this quote is also alluding to that. The greatest battle was fought in the general's tent. The most important effort in our Krishna consciousness movement is, to maintain our unity amongst ourselves, because if we become divided, divide and conquer, this is the strategy of the adversary. This is Maya's trick. And we can see that in the last couple of years in particular, there's been a lot of division in the world, and it's also influenced religious organizations. I was saying that the Mormons had a similar situation to ISKCON, where the main kind of mainstream part of the organization was promoting the vaccinations, whereas there were many people who didn't like that. So in ISKCON, it was the same thing. And it caused a lot of division. And this is the intent of a lot of these initiatives that have been placed in front of us. Maya's trick is to say, let me see, or Kali. Kali is all about conflict. So Kali is always looking for opportunities to create a situation that will put people against each other. So it's really important as devotees, even if there are some differences, that we go back to what are the things that we all agree on, that we can't dispute. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Chanting Hare Krishna is the Yuga Dharma for the sage. Coming back to these core elements that unite us is so important, because, as it says here, the greatest battle is fought in the general's tent. If we can be strong and united amongst ourselves, then it'll be very hard for the movement to be conquered. But if we're fighting amongst ourselves all the time over, different issues, then it just weakens us. It's just like the idea of a disease, If the body's fighting a disease, the energy is going towards that. And then there's not as much strength to go out in the world and, do your activities that you're meant to be doing. You're not able to be as productive. So this is kind of Srila Prabhupada's body. And if it's diseased, it's spending a lot of its energy fighting amongst itself, almost like an autoimmune disease, then it's going to weaken that body and we won't be able to achieve the greatness that Prabhupada wanted for it. So it's a great challenge, but we need to keep it in mind all the time, that Kali's purpose is to divide and conquer. Conflict is Kali's weapon. And so we need to fight the conflict with unity. And Prabhupada gave the example in Mayapur. There was some conflict going on between the householder temple presidents and some sannyasis. The sannyasis were traveling around America, and whenever there was a good brahmachari, they just took them away with them and took them, doing Sankirtan in a bus traveling around the country distributing books. So, of course, distributing books is a wonderful service. It's the perfect thing for brahmacharis. But then what happened is the temple presidents had no one to run their temples, basically. So this conflict was going on that, the householders were saying, well, we're preaching and making all these devotees and you're just taking them away, making life difficult for us. And there was quite a conflict. It wasn't just a joke. There was some very heated tension going on there. Prabhupada's solution? Kirtan, kirtan, kirtan. Just do kirtan together. So much. And there's some funny quote, and I can't remember all the details, but it was something like, resolution, dissolution, revolution, no solution, etc., etc. He was saying that, don't get caught up in trying to, solve problems through, making resolutions or through legal process or whatever. The solution is do kirtan together, build the rapport, and build the unity based on Krishna consciousness. And that will give you the strength, will give us the strength to go out and fight against Maya rather than spending our energy fighting each other. We should be united and fighting Maya and fighting Kali outside. So then I'll just put up here what you've written. Thanks for keeping the conversation going here. Thanks for the comments. That's another angle on first private victories, then public ones. Embarrassing, bringing people into a fighting family. Yeah, absolutely. What's the saying? Don't hang your dirty linen out in public or something. So yeah, when people come, we want them to experience what Krishna consciousness is meant to be, which is a loving family that, yeah, we may have disagreements, but we have a way of dealing with them that's very respectful and that keeps the core purpose of Prabhupada's mission strongly in the center. Yeah, so thanks for that, Prabhu. Those are great comments to bring up. Interesting, isn't it? We're talking about changing clothes and the soul and the body, and the conversation can lead in all kinds of directions. Yeah, interesting. But these are really very relevant points, I think, in the times that we're living in. Whatever situations have arisen that have caused conflict in the past, you can be sure there'll be more things coming up that will lead to potential conflict. So we need to look out for it and not don't be tricked by Kali into these conflict situations, because it's so easy to sort of take sides and let politics ruin what's really meant to be a pure spiritual movement. All right, I'll end here. Thank you very much, Amiatma Prabhu, for your comments, and anyone else who's been watching. If you'd like to add any comments, feel free. I'll check in Facebook or YouTube and reply if anyone wants to add anything else. So thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.